What if I told you that in a single year, a country not officially at war lost more civilians than the United States lost soldiers during the entire 20 years of the Vietnam War? This isn't a hypothetical. In 2017, the nation of Brazil registered nearly 64,000 homicides. To put that number in perspective, it's about 175 people murdered every single day. That's 7 people every hour. By the time you finish watching this video, another 2 people will have been killed. This number is a ghost that haunts Brazil. It's a statistic so large it feels abstract, a scale of violence that is almost impossible for most of us to comprehend. And while that shocking peak in 2017 has since declined, the underlying epidemic of violence remains one of the country's most profound challenges. The easy answer, the one you've likely heard, is to simply say drugs and favelas. But that's not the full story. Not even close. The reality is a complex machine, a system of violence built on a foundation of history, inequality, and politics. To truly understand why Brazil has one of the highest murder rates on the planet, we need to look past the headlines and diagnose the deep-seated illness that produces these staggering numbers year after year. The roots of Brazil's violence are not shallow. They run deep into the very soil of its formation. For nearly 400 years, Brazil was the world's largest slave society. It was the last country in the Americas to abolish slavery in 1888. This wasn't just a system of labor. It was a system of social control built on extreme, legalized violence. When slavery was finally abolished, it was done without any form of compensation, land distribution, or social integration for the millions of newly freed Afro-Brazilians. They were left in a state of profound social and economic marginalization. This legacy of inequality didn't just disappear. It became the bedrock of modern Brazilian society. As cities like Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo began to industrialize in the 20th century, millions of poor, predominantly black Brazilians migrated from rural areas in search of work. But they were largely excluded from the formal city. They were pushed to the peripheries, to the steep, undesirable hillsides, where they built their own homes and communities with little to no government support. These were the origins of the favelas. These communities were not born from crime, but from necessity and neglect. For decades, the state was almost entirely absent, except for the occasional, often violent, police incursion. This absence created a power vacuum, a space where alternative forms of order and violence could grow. The second critical piece of the puzzle arrived in the 1980s. As the global demand for cocaine surged, Brazil's strategic location made it the perfect transit hub for drugs produced in the Andes and destined for Europe. This new, incredibly lucrative trade needed to operate from bases that were beyond the effective control of the state. The neglected favelas of Rio de Janeiro became the ideal incubator. It was here that Brazil's powerful drug factions were born. The most famous, the Comando Vermelho, or Red Command, had its origins in a uniquely Brazilian phenomenon. It was formed in the 1970s inside a high-security prison, where common criminals and left-wing political prisoners of the military dictatorship were housed together. The political prisoners taught the common criminals strategies of organization, discipline, and armed struggle. When these criminals were released, they applied these lessons to the burgeoning drug trade. The result was something entirely new. These weren't just street gangs. They were highly organized, quasi-militarized factions that took control of entire communities. They created their own parallel states within the favelas, providing services the government didn't, like basic welfare and a brutal form of summary justice. They enforced their rule through territorial warfare, not just against rival gangs, but against the state itself. The favela, once simply a symbol of poverty and state neglect, became the front line of a low-intensity civil war, armed with assault rifles and financed by a billion-dollar global industry. This is the point where the machinery of violence truly kicks into high gear. You have a massive, heavily armed non-state actor, the drug faction, controlling large swaths of urban territory. And you have the official state, primarily in the form of the police, trying to reclaim that territory. The result is a cycle of conflict that is responsible for a huge portion of Brazil's homicides. The factions fight each other for control of lucrative drug selling points, known as bocas de fumo. These turf wars are incredibly violent, often fought with military-grade weaponry in densely populated residential areas. Think of someone like Maria, a community leader in her neighborhood. She's not a real person, but an archetype of thousands like her. She knows which street corner belongs to which faction. She knows the sound of different rifles. She knows that when the shooting starts, the safest place is the bathroom, away from the windows. For her, the violence isn't a statistic. It's the texture of daily life, a constant humming anxiety. The state's response to this reality has been overwhelmingly militarized. For decades, the dominant policing strategy, particularly in Rio, has been one of armed confrontation. Special police units, like Rio's infamous BOPE, carry out heavily armed incursions into favelas. These operations often result in intense shootouts that kill not only suspected gang members, but also innocent residents. This strategy has created a human rights catastrophe. Brazilian police are among the deadliest in the world. In some years, police killings have accounted for more than 10% of all homicides in the country. This has fostered a deep sense of distrust and animosity between residents like Maria and the police, who are often seen not as protectors, but as an occupying army. This breakdown of trust is critical. It means residents are less likely to cooperate with official investigations, which contributes to another shocking statistic. The vast majority of homicides in Brazil go unsolved. This impunity creates a vicious cycle. If murder has no consequences, violence becomes an accepted tool for resolving disputes. And this dynamic is not limited to Rio. In the 2000s, the violence metastasized. The major factions of São Paulo and Rio, the PCC and Comando Vermelho, began a bloody expansion across the country to control new drug routes. This plunged the states of the Northeast into chaos. Cities like Fortaleza, Salvador, and Natal, once known primarily for their beautiful beaches, saw their murder rates explode. Local gangs were either absorbed or forced to fight, turning entire neighborhoods into battlegrounds. The violence here wasn't just a spillover. It took on its own local characteristics, a fragmented, multi-sided war that made these cities, for a time, even more dangerous than Rio. There is a final, crucial layer to this machine of violence: politics. In a country with such high levels of fear, public security has become a dominant political issue. And for many politicians, the most popular solution has been a promise of tough-on-crime policies. This often translates to support for more aggressive, more violent policing tactics, and a political discourse that dehumanizes criminals, and by extension, the poor, black residents of the communities where they operate. This political climate makes reform incredibly difficult. Efforts to implement community policing, to focus on intelligence and investigation rather than armed confrontation, or to address the root causes of crime through social investment, are often dismissed as being soft on crime. The public demand for security, amplified by sensationalist media, often creates a political mandate for the very militarized strategies that have proven to be so deadly and ineffective. This cycle of violence, inequality, and politics is the engine that produced the terrifying number of 64,000 murders in 2017. Since that peak, the numbers have thankfully seen a significant decline, hovering in the low 40,000s in recent years. This drop is attributed to a number of factors, including new state-level public security plans, a fragile truce between some of the major factions, and the professionalization of some police forces. But the machine itself is still in place. The deep systemic issues have not been resolved. So what is the path forward? There is no single, easy answer, but successful case studies from within Brazil offer a glimpse of what works. In the state of Pernambuco, a program called Pacto pela Vida, or Pact for Life, integrated police forces and set clear, data-driven targets for homicide reduction, leading to a sustained drop in murders for several years. In Espírito Santo, a focus on high-quality forensic investigation and solving homicides, rather than just street patrols, dramatically increased conviction rates and, in turn, lowered the violence. These programs prove that change is possible. The challenge is scaling these proven, localized successes into a national strategy. It requires a long-term political commitment to addressing the root causes of violence, not just its symptoms. It means tackling the profound racial and social inequality that has haunted the country for centuries. It means investing in community-led initiatives, supporting the Marias of Brazil who are on the front line, creating safe spaces and opportunities for young people. And it means building a new model of public security, one based on trust and intelligence, not just force. The story of Brazil's violence is not one of an inherently violent people. It is the story of a nation grappling with the deep wounds of its own history. It is the story of how state neglect and systemic inequality can create the perfect conditions for organized crime to flourish. And it is a powerful, tragic lesson in how the politics of fear can perpetuate cycles of violence. The path to a more peaceful Brazil is not simple, and it is not short. But the decline from the 2017 peak shows that the numbers are not destiny. They are the result of a system, and systems can be changed. It suggests that with a combination of intelligent security policies and a deep, sustained commitment to social justice, the machine of violence can be dismantled piece by piece. Brazil's struggle is a stark reminder that true security is never just about policing. It is about building a society where every citizen has a stake and every life has value.